Hi everyone. Today we are learning the last topic before our percent test, and that topic is interest. We have 4 definitions that we need to write down in our notes before we do our practice problems. The first one is interest. There are actually 2 different definitions of interest depending on how we use the term interest. So the first is the amount charged for borrowing money. So if you borrow money to buy a car or to buy a house, they're going to charge you a percentage for borrowing that money. The second one is an added, so this is definition 1, and here's definition 2, an added amount when saving money at a bank. So if you have a savings account at a bank, you get a small percentage of your money back, usually each month. And it doesn't usually add up to much, but it does add to your bank account. Let's keep going. Next one is principal. And this is the amount invested or borrowed. Okay, again, depending on the problem, it's the initial amount. So if I borrowed $50,000 to buy my house, that would be the principal, the amount we borrowed. Next is the rate. And the rate is simply the percent and it will be given as a percent, so let's say 3%, but we always want to write it as a decimal. So again, we would convert this to a decimal, which is 0.03. So put a little star there, write as decimal. If you forgot how to do that, we take our decimal point, this one, our decimal's at the end, and we move it 2 times to the left, 1, 2. There's our new decimal, and then we fill in our empty spots with zeros. Okay, we'll practice that in class as well. And the last one is time. The amount of time in years. That is important that we're talking about years. You can go ahead and pause the video at this point if you need time to copy down those definitions. And we will continue. When we're working with interest, we use this equation, interest, I, equals principal times rate times time. So let's go down in the first example problem. And just like we did with our percent problems, we're going to annotate the sentence and figure out what information we are given. May has $90 in her savings account and earns 5% interest per year. After 3 years, how much money is in her account? So let's go back up and interest, the initial, principal. We're going to do principal first. The amount invested or borrowed. How much did May have invested in her savings account? Well, she had $90, so we're going to underline that, and this is our principal, the initial amount. Do we have a rate? Is there a percent in our problem? Yes, there is. She earns 5% interest per year, so we'll underline that. This is our rate. But how do we want to write our rate? Not as a percent, but as a decimal. So 5%, find our decimal point, move it 2 times to the left, and our rate is actually 0.05. And there are 4 pieces of information in our equation, and we have to be given 3 of them in order to solve. So we should have 1 more, and we have our time of 3 years. Here's our T. So we have P, R, and T, and we will be able to figure out the interest. Let's go ahead and plug that in. So I equals P times R times T. Principal, $90, times rate, 0.05, times time, 3 years. You can go ahead and use a calculator here. So we have 90 times 0.05 times 3. So we have 13.5. This is the amount of interest. But I want us to look back in the problem. It asks, after 3 years, how much money is in her account? Well, I hope that her account didn't go down to $13. Let's go ahead and look at the definition of interest again. The added amount when saving money at a bank. So she had $90, and this is the amount the bank is giving her. So to find out the total amount in her account, we need to add those two amounts together. So she started with $90, and then we added $13.50. To add some decimals to our 90 and go ahead and add. So she actually has $103.50, and this is our answer for this problem. We have only one more example, and then you can practice. Juan borrows $3,000 to buy a new car. The interest rate is 7%, and he will pay back the loan in 5 years. How much interest will he pay? So this one's a little different. It's asking us for how much interest he'll pay. So this problem, we won't have to do that last step of adding things together. Let's go ahead and annotate our sentence. Juan borrows $3,000. That's the initial amount, which we call our principal. The interest rate is 7%. And again, here's our rate. But we do want to write that as a decimal, 0.07. And we're given time, 5 years. That's our T. And again, we're going to use the same equation. I equals PRT. I equals principal times rate times time. Our principal is 3,000 times our rate, 0.07, times our time, 5 years. Okay, again, we can go back to our calculator. Can't really see it, there's a glare. There we go. So we have 3,000 times our rate, which is 0.07. This amount, 210, is how much he will pay in 1 year, but he is borrowing the money for 5 years, so we need to multiply that 1 year rate times 5, and we get $1,050. So when we do our multiplication, we get $1,050. And we want to make sure that answers the question. We solved for interest, and it does ask how much interest. So this is our final answer. Okay, that video was a little bit longer, but we have some good information. And try the 3 problems on your own.